All right, welcome back to the professional interview series with Park and Recreation Professionals. Today we've got with us Mr. Shane Mize. Shane, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. Uh,
Good.
what time is it there in Pflugerville, Texas? Are you in Central Time?
Yeah. So 4:43.
All right, we're gonna try to make this quick because I know you're on. You got better things to do with wife and kiddos.
No, this is great.
So to start off with, tell everybody where you're at, what your title is, or what you do, and then we'll go from there.
So I'm the director of Parks and Rec for the city of Pflugerville, Texas. Pflugerville, Texas is a suburb on the northeast corner of Austin. We touch Austin city limits. We have about 75,000 people in our town, and I've been doing this for about 17 years now. Went to my undergrad at Hardin Simmons University, which was a little private school in Abilene, and then did my master's at Western Illinois University, where I worked. I was a GA in a couple different locations there while I was getting my master's, and then I've come in and I've worked full time in the Parks and Rec industry ever since.
To kind of go back, well, let's go back a little bit more. Where are you originally from? Where did you grow up?
So I'm from the West Texas area, Abilene, Brownwood area. I lived a little on the coast. I also lived most of my youth and teen life. I spent in a suburb of Fort Worth called Burleson, Texas. So
And then you went to Abilene for college at Hardin Simmons.
went to Hardin Simmons, play a little football, and then coached for a while. I met my wife. We got married. We had a kid. I coached on the team for a while, and then graduated. And was trying to figure out if I wanted to do. At that time, I wanted to coach. I thought that was I always felt like I would be somebody who did service, whether I was going to be some sort of counselor or coach or teacher. I didn't really think you could make a career in Parks and Rec. I didn't know that was a thing. In fact, my dad still doesn't really understand it. 17 years in, he tells people I coach for a city. He doesn't really understand, because when I got into this field full time, I was running volleyball leagues and basketball leagues and coaching teams. And so Dad was like, "Oh, you're still a coach. You just coach for a city." So I think he starts to grasp it now. But for a long time, he didn't know that that was a way you could make any real career. You could raise a family on something like that. And I didn't either. But I went to grad school at Western Illinois and was going to work with the football team. In fact, I'd had a GA with the University of Kansas, was going to work with that football team, and I had worked with my football staff and my Parks and Rec tourism department in Hardin Simmons to nail that down. And then the coach got let go. Coach Allen got let go, and Coach Mangino from Oklahoma went up there, and he did not want to bring anybody in but his own people. And
Yeah.
so I was kind of scrambling, and there was an intramural job at Western Illinois, and the professor at Hardin Simmons knew a park professor or knew a campus rec person, Judy.
Oh
He knew
yeah.
Judy, and so I went up there with my wife and a small child, and we did an interview, and they offered me the job. And my wife played um, a piano exercise, and they offered her a graduate assistantship. So all of a sudden, we were able to kind of weather the storm a little bit. And so I started out coaching. I was going to coach, and I just didn't. It wasn't the football and athletics and mindset I was used to. I mean, these all these guys thought they were going to pro at Western Illinois, and I remember thinking none of y'all are going to sniff the pro. But there was a level of entitlement there that I remember thinking I think maybe I should go to the rec side. And
Yeah.
I'd already gotten my graduate assistantship in intramurals. That was what was available when I moved up there, and quickly just decided coaching wasn't for me. Football wasn't for me. College athletics wasn't for me, but recreation was. And so ultimately switched my major to RPTA at Western Illinois, and graduated and moved to the city of Fort Worth, where I started working full time.
So, and a lot of people know my background, my students and whatnot. Shane and I did not go to Western Illinois at the same time. It was just
At the same time.
great luck that we ran into each other and we had the similar background.
That's right. Yeah, no, I think we just missed each other. We know some people that we know the same people, but we didn't
Right.
work with them all at the same time. Yeah.
It was that's always I forget about that, and it's always kind of fun to hear. It's like, you know what, that is what are the
Dr.
chances, right?
Yoder, Dr. Adkins,
Yeah,
Judy, and those folks up there. So you knew them all. Jim Miner, those folks. So we shouldn't work with them at the same time.
yeah. So where did you go after you graduated from Western?
So I thought I would do campus rec, but I Western has an internship requirement when you
Mhm.
graduate, and I've got a wife and a small child, and actually by then we had a second. Um, so I've got two kids. I've graduated and I've all but finished my internship for my degree, and so I'm applying at college jobs, but it's campus rec jobs that have internships or maybe entry level, and they just the ones that I could afford to do that maybe were the right fit didn't select me, and the ones that did offer me jobs like Georgia Tech and others, I couldn't make it work financially, and so I was like, well, I've got to figure out raising a small family what I'm going to do. So I moved back into my old room in Fort Worth with my wife and two children, and that was a lot of fun and came full circle and worked for the city of Arlington as an intern
Yeah,
over the summer and planned worked with some of their park maintenance mowing and their summer camp programming, and then planned an after school program for one of their rec centers, and that uh, was something I stuffed into my portfolio when I started applying for jobs, that I had camp experience, park maintenance experience, and that I had created an after school program for one of the rec centers there, and I got my first full time job in the field in 2004 with City of Fort Worth at a rec center down there, running being a program specialist or program coordinator.
and that's just developing programs, facilitating programs there.
Yeah, so every rec center had a center supervisor, a programmer, a janitor or an aide, a custodian, and then some part-time staff. And you did year-round programming, but it was heavily after-school related and summer day camp related. We were in pretty low-income areas for the most part, and so not a lot of adult programming. If it was fitness or health related, and for those in that area, in that bracket, that lower income bracket doesn't have the world's greatest health or fitness, from either their eating habits or just their um, prioritizing health. And so, we were able to offer those classes to the community, as well as camps and after school programs and local special events. And ultimately, I created a summer day camp program that I worked with Texas Parks and Wildlife. We created a pilot program where it was a completely landlocked outdoor camp program. And so previously, I would have had to reach out for a grant where I teach these kids about fishing and swimming and hunting and all the education that goes along with that. But I would get Coca-Cola to maybe sponsor our trip to a state park. The problem with that concept, the first summer I did it, was you get those kids who have never been at a state park, and there is no real application. You're still trying to remind them of all the things you taught them, and by the time they're starting to feel comfortable outside, you're loading the bus back up.
Yeah.
And so after that summer, I remember thinking there's got to be a better way. Reached out to Texas Parks and Wildlife, a gentleman that I became really close with named Steve Campbell, and I started to create kind of this landlocked program where you could come in and you could fish indoors. We would put up a blue tarp and we'd have them throw to those backyard bass, and they'd reel them in, and we'd even have education. So you could use the outdoor guide. You could reel in this fish, and on the back it would say a bass, 10 inches long, and you could look in the guide and see if you were actually able to keep it or if you had to throw it out. So we did fishing derbies, we did kayak and boater ed on blue mats, and how you rolled in and how you roll out. And we did bow hunting for hunter education. We did pop-up campsites in the gym, and we called it basic outdoor skills for
Okay.
camping. And we did all of these throughout the summer. And so then when we were able to get that day at the lake or that day at the park, it felt much more like they could apply the whole time, which is really cool. They feel much more comfortable in all these different settings.
Sure.
Um, and so that got us actually a lot of acclaim, and Athletic Business wrote about us. And Steve and I went on some tours. We did some presentations on behalf of his agency, Texas Parks and Wildlife, through the state on behalf of my agency, through TRAPS and Southwest Parks and Rec Training Institute. And then right around that time, the Take Me Fishing Foundation was really starting to get big. The Recreational Boating and Fishing Foundation had done the Take Me Fishing initiative, and they were looking for pilot programs and what they called anchor sites. So, one site in the Southwest, one site in the Pacific Northwest, one site in the Midwest, and they were selecting 6 agencies to be these anchor sites, and they would be training centers for that area. And these agencies would get a huge sum of money, about $80,000 in training and supplies for outdoor education. And because of our experiences and what we had done so far, we were selected as the site for Southwest Fort Worth, Texas was. So we became an anchor agency for that area. And then I went out and would train Odessa and Lubbock. I'd fly to these places and train their Parks and Rec departments on doing those same types of programs. So it was great for my career. It was great for the Parks and Rec department. Ultimately, it led to some acclaim and some some awards, and ultimately I moved to Missouri City where I was the recreation superintendent from there.
Yeah, so that's what I was saying. I know you moved to Missouri City next, which is in southern Texas, right? Houston
Yeah, it's a
area.
suburb of Houston. Yeah, it touches Houston. Yeah.
So tell us about some things, some experiences you had there that you took away with you, so to speak.
So Missouri City was great for my career. We got to build a rec center there. I got to help manage a $4.5 million rec center plus a $500,000 grant from Texas Parks and Wildlife to help fund that rec facility. I got to see it. I got to go through the process of building it and being involved in the design and the bond process, and then staffing it and managing it. It's day-to-day operations. As the rec superintendent in Missouri City, I had the rec center, the 16 outdoor tennis courts, had all the pavilions, all the rentals, the athletics, special events, all those types of programming, senior programming, all that fell under the recreation side of Parks and Rec, and um, my team, my recreation programmers that I managed, and the recreation managers that I managed in the process.
So how long were you there in Missouri City?
I was there for almost 8 years, seven plus years in Missouri City. I got a chance. I was a rec superintendent. I was the interim assistant director at one time before I left, and so there were some opportunities to build a rec center from scratch, design it, build it, implement it, serve the public. With a brand new rec center, something that's never been there before, and we weren't replacing one. All of a sudden, we've added this recreational amenity, this fitness amenity, this basketball court amenity. We had baseball, softball, pitching machines on the back end. We had tennis courts, and so it was really cool to see our impact in the community. And then as people left and promoted and moved on to other opportunities, there were chances for me to act and manage tennis contracts and promote as an interim assistant director. And I did that for a while, and that led me to believe that I could be a director. Started applying for director jobs. Went through a couple of hiring processes with other cities, and finally moved to Hutto, where I was the director of Parks and Rec for the city of Hutto.
So when you talk about like you know that those experiences in Missouri City kind of got you thinking that you were ready to take that next step. Um, when you got that realization, what were some things that were going on? Like what did you think you lacked, or what experiences did you think you needed that you finally kind of came to that realization that you were ready to start looking?
I tell a lot of people that I get to mentor that sometimes you just have to get director on your resume. You know what I mean? Like ultimately, once it's on there, it can't be taken away from you. And I've heard that from others as well. Once I was the interim director and then assistant director for a while. In the process of us finding a new director and managing budgets and council presentations and going through CIP processes, I thought, okay, I can do this. Like yeah, it didn't always feel comfortable, but I think when you reach that threshold of comfortability is when you start to look for that next challenge, or at least I did, right? Like there, for a while, Missouri City was a tough job. You're building a new facility, you're building a new staff, you're trying to mold them to believe in the service the way you believe in it, or to make sure that we're responsive in the way I want to be responsive. And sometimes I was as proud of what we didn't offer as I was as what we maybe did offer. And so convincing others that we're not just going to throw a program in a room because that room's available, but making sure that we're wise with our growth, so when we find the program that needs to fit in that room's still available. And so going through some of those things and really leading a staff, managing a staff. But there was a time where it just felt like it was run so smoothly and everything was going really well. And then my director left and there was a void in leadership, and I got the opportunity to step in, and it was great to be challenged again. But we were coming to the end of that, and Missouri City was going to be looking for someone that had some experience as a director already. And so I knew that I wasn't going to be the director there. And I thought, if I want to be a director somewhere, I have to go find a director job,
Sure.
So um, started looking around and went through some interviews and was really close on some. I was a finalist on some. I was a runner up on some, and it taught me a lot. And it really, I tell some folks that if you wait to interview for your dream job and you haven't practiced interviewing, you haven't gone through some interview processes at all, you've really short sold yourself as far as a viable candidate. Your resume is intact and your cover letter is perfect and your experience is good and you got the nice suit and you're ready for everything. But if you haven't interviewed in 5 years and there have been three or four other people you're going up against who have been in this interview grind, they're going to be ready for scenarios and questions that you're not ready for. And it's going to bear out in that process. And it really did for me too. But when I was in El Paso and when I was in these other towns and I was going through these processes, it made me very comfortable at Hutto. In fact, it made me almost confident when I went into Hutto, because I was like, I've been through some fires now. I've been through some stuff. Like
Sure.
I've had some questions come my way that I was reeling a little bit, and I answered. And afterwards, I was like, wrote that down. After that interview was over, it's like, boy, I gotta get better on what I would do if this is asked of me again.
Yeah.
And Hutto was a great opportunity for that. And in Pflugerville, um, popped up, and Pflugerville is quite a jump from Hutto. It's about double the size, and there's about 45 more miles of trails and a lot more outdoor amenities and staff. And so, but it had been so recently since I'd actually still done the interview, I still felt very confident in
Yeah.
Pflugerville applying for it. But I would hate to hear someone on the other end of this conversation bide their time, develop, have the resume dialed in perfectly, and their cover letter is great, and their application looks good, and they get in an interview and they fall flat on their face because they just haven't gone through that process. I would encourage everybody, if you want to be a director, or if you want to be an assistant director, or if you want to be a rec programmer, and maybe you don't want to leave Texas, I would encourage you to apply for director jobs on the East Coast and the West Coast. I would encourage you to go through the processes, hear their interview questions,
Yeah.
um, and I don't think it's a waste of time. I've heard people say, well, don't you think you're wasting that agency's time? Those agencies that I actually tried to get jobs with, they did not feel bad for not selecting me. They did not
Right.
say, man, I feel bad for Shane. He got a suit and he bought it and he flew out here and we didn't select him. I feel so bad for him. No, they are in the pursuit, the dogged pursuit of their best top candidate. And
Right.
that's what I am. I'm in the pursuit of my best top agency. And so if I ultimately take a couple other agencies along for a ride as I go through the process, even if they offer you the job, first of all, if they offer you the job, fly out to that city, tour around, and if it's an amazing experience, then you take the job if it's viable for you. But if you don't want to leave the state, or if it's not the job you want, you politely decline it and thank them for their time, and you're ready for that job that you're hoping pops up in that area. So I felt really confident going into the interview process, or more confident than I would have if I hadn't gone through those,
Yeah.
going from Pflugerville or Hutto to Pflugerville.
So tell us a little bit more. So you're in Pflugerville now, and I know that both Hutto and Pflugerville have been recent, because every time at Fort Worth and Missouri City. So tell us a little bit more about Pflugerville. Like, you're the director of parks there, and so what is it? What does the city have? What do you kind of oversee? What's going on in Pflugerville?
Well, they shot the Friday Night Lights Series at our old stadium. So that's like our claim to fame. That, and we've had some movies out here. But Pflugerville is a smaller town. It's a young town.
Yeah.
It's 55 years old. So it's an interesting dynamic because it's a town where the Flugers started the town, and I serve in a town where the originators or the original family of that town still live. Like that's a very unique thing. If you go to Miami, Miami's 200 years old. You go to Fort Worth, it's 150, 200 years old. You go to Pflugerville, there are still Flugers walking around. They
Yeah.
still serve on committees, and the other families that started Pflugerville, the Bulls and the Weisses, and those are all still around. So you'll see a park, and then you'll meet someone, and you're like, oh, that's y'all's park. That's the thing that donated. So it's an interesting dynamic in that sense. But it's a small agricultural town on the northeast corner of Austin that, due to Austin development and Austin growth and the Teslas and the Googles and the Facebooks and all those types of tech and other industries moving to Austin, has seen just a gigantic amount of growth. And
Yeah.
it's got to go everywhere. It's kind of like when you throw a rock in the water and it disperses everywhere. When you throw a Tesla in Austin, it disperses everywhere, right? Like
Yeah.
jobs come in, houses come in, all the infrastructure that's associated with those things come in, and it kind of spreads out. And so Pflugerville's seeing that. But in that growth, they were always very pro parks, definitely pro trails. I have over 50 plus miles of trails for a town of 75,000, which is a huge number. And I've got 3 outdoor pools. 2 of them are heated. I've got a rec center, 2 dog parks, 2 splash pads, almost 1,500 acres of parkland. Almost 900 to 950 of those acres are developed.
Mhm.
So it's a very plug and play standard suburban park system next to a huge urban area. It would compare very favorably to the Mansfields and Sugarlands and Bernie's or whatever, those types of suburbs in those towns of Houston, Dallas, and San Antonio. It's a large suburban park system.
And how many folks do you supervise within that park system?
29 full-time staff. We have about probably another 22 to 25 part-time staff, and then we have over 100 seasonal staff as well.
And that's just to accommodate for programs and seasonally.
Camps and pools and aquatics programs and things like that. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, I know, like you said, you haven't been there too long, but what are some of the things so far that you've really enjoyed about your current position and what you've been able to do so far?
So when I came in, there were some deferred maintenance, not necessarily because they didn't care about these park facilities, but because they were growing so fast. And all of a sudden they were going from 50,000, 60,000, 60,000, 70,000 so quick that there's still only so much of a pot of money, right? So like
Yeah.
you're building for the future, but that future isn't here yet. You're not taxing them yet. So you're trying to have a town that can accommodate all that growth, but you don't have the tax dollars, the funding base to really facilitate it all. And in the absence of that, you see public safety uh, get funded in some streets and things as it should. Those are things that provide quality of life to a city. So when I got here, there were some areas that had just been deferred that I've been able to bring back into the conversation, bring it back before council, get some funds to help update some of these facilities. An outdoor pool needed a new bathhouse, a shower, bathroom area. We have a green red barn, which is this really nice rental facility. A lot of weddings are done there, and it's very farm agriculture based and kind of an homage to our heritage as a town. In fact, it's in Heritage Park, and it's next to one of the old Pfluger's homes that's now a museum. And so it's this really cool, um, not themed in the cheesy way, but a very themed, agriculturally themed park.
Gotcha.
And it had this nice barn structure that people got married at, but it needed some structural improvements and just an update. We've got some maintenance facilities at 1849 Park, one of our sports complexes, and others that I've been able to identify. But ultimately, I guess what I'm most proud of, and will probably be my legacy over the next couple years for sure, And what I'm super focused on is we just passed a bond for $90 million in parks improvements. So we just got it passed in this fall election, this 2020 fall election, and it's 42.3 million in park improvements, and it's 47.3 million in a rec center, a new multi-gen rec center facility. So we're right at $89.6 million in park improvements over the next 5 years. So super excited about that.
That's awesome, man. I it's one of those things that I don't know, like you get to see those things from the ground up, right? Just
Right.
feels so good.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
so before I go to the next set of questions, I got to ask you, and this is something I've asked several people within these interviews, is if you weren't doing what Shane Mize is doing now, if you weren't a director or you weren't in parks and recreation, so to speak, and you got to do whatever job you wanted, right? What would be your dream job, or what job would you pick if you could do anything you wanted?
It's super interesting. If I wasn't in my job right now, like today, I think I'd try to go into consulting, right? But I would have the experience from Parks and Recs. That's a bit of a cheating answer because
Yeah,
I was
can't
never in
cheat.
parks, right? They would never hire me to be a consultant. I think um, I enjoy service. I enjoy talking to people. I think I would be doing something in that capacity, and maybe I would have coached if recreation wasn't an option. I would have seen myself potentially coaching. I enjoy the idea of going through the processes of interviewing people and talking to people and getting to know them. I could see myself in this day and age being much more interested in doing something like a podcast. I also I like the idea of entrepreneurship, and so I could see myself doing something on the entrepreneurship side.
Yeah. Well, so what are your favorite areas, or what are your favorite areas? What podcast do you listen to now?
So I listen to I like the for my sports talk fix. I get the Dan Lebitard podcast. He's a guy out of Miami, does some national stuff. For the things that get me thinking type podcast, I like listening to Axis. And Malcolm Gladwell is another great one. Just gives you stories about things that you didn't think you know about. Some of the podcasts that Serial and some of the stuff that that group is doing. I think there was a B Town was another interesting one. No, S Town. S Town. Yeah, it is it's called S Town. So it's about a town and about a gentleman from a town in South Alabama and trying to overcome some of their cultural biases and stuff. So some stuff like that. I like something that I can listen to and really plug in and just kind of escape.
Sure.
But I'm not much of a fiction person. I'm never seen Star Wars and all those other shows. I know Harry Potter. Never seen any of them. I got kids; they watch them. I know kind of the premises of some of them, but I'm much more interested in like history and um,
I
things like
listen to
that.
one.
We went to New Orleans last week, and I went to the World War II Museum. So I'm lame in that sense. But
No, that's not lame. I listen to one called "Stuff You Should Know." You ever heard of that?
yeah, I've seen that.
Yeah, it's pretty like some of the topics aren't exactly interest peaking for me, but a lot of it's just stuff like it's just you're like wow, you know. Anyway,
I like Nate Bargatze. Have you ever heard of that comedian, Nate Bargatze?
yeah.
He's got a podcast, Nate Land, and it's just him and his buddies talking about stuff. I listen to that sometimes as well.
Um, Before I let you go, if a student or a young professional is sitting here thinking, "Oh man, Shane's career path's pretty cool. I want to I want to be where he is one day, whether that's a director of Pflugerville or a director somewhere else." But I liked how he's kind of managed his professional path, so to speak. Are there any tips or pieces of advice or things you wish you'd have known that you can provide for folks?
Yeah, I think first of all, it's tough to know what the future is going to look like. Period. Right. But it's tougher to stop it. Like I might be able to tell you that if you look at Netflix and what it did to Blockbuster, if you look at DoorDash and what it's done to maybe potentially eating out, or Instacart and what it's done to shopping, when you look at Potentially the kids, the students, the young adults that you educate, and how they affect already the world. What Amazon has done to big box, what Orange Theory has done to big box, you know, fitness places. You're starting to see a different service model out there, and I'd be lying if I told you that if it can impact restaurants and retail and development, it's going to impact Parks and Rec. It hadn't really yet, but I think there is, in some ways, a reckoning coming for any of these Parks and Rec departments that just think they can roll the ball out there and do average programs. I think COVID reset some of that philosophy, but you're ultimately on the rec side of this. When I build this brand new $47 million rec center, it's going to be 75 to 100,000 square feet. It's going to have a decent amount of staff and it's going to have a lot of cool amenities, but it's going to have to compete in that field. It's going to have to be a cost recovery facility. And so you're going to have to do things like the private sector does. So if you come up through the park side or you come up through the aquatic side, I think you go get your undergrad, you get your master's, you go into Parks and Rec, you manage those facilities and you continue to promote. If you come up the rec side, I think there's a chance that you look at private sector recreation. I think there's a chance that you look at, um, BYU has changed their recreation Parks and Rec model, and it's more experience based and cultivating experiences and curating experiences and caring about the experience from when you get out of the car to when you get into the building. And was it a 12-step walk or a 100-step walk? And does that immediately put that person upset before their forehand lesson? You know what I mean? And
Right.
so I think on the rec side, and which is the side I kind of came through, and you kind of come through Parks and Rec in a couple different ways. You could be a planner or a park ops person or an aquatics person or a rec person. I think the rec side and maybe even the aquatic side has to look at viable options on the private sector. I think cities will always own land. We have mechanisms in place to ensure that's the case. Like if Dr. Michael Bradley builds 500 homes in Pflugerville, he has to dedicate parkland with those homes. Not only is he building roads and streets and infrastructure, but he's building land. And he also has a development fee that he has to pay Pflugerville, or he has to put parks on that so we can take that fee and put some park improvements on there. So cities will always have parks.
Yeah.
And if you come through that way, I think you get your undergrad, your master's, you just start working in the field and you take those promotions. You make sure you go get your certifications and you go through the classes when given the opportunity and you learn and network and promote. I think private sector is going to be a viable option for the rec side. I think someone's going to build a rec center and not in the distant future, they're going to look, not too distant future, they're going to look for someone with sliotar bomb experience as much as they're going to look for someone with the experience running 3 outdoor pools in a suburban or urban area. So, in fact, I think there are already some people that have come over from the private sector and aquatics that are managing municipal aquatic facilities. And so I think that sea change is starting in some ways. And so either way, you're going to have to work hard. It's not an 8 to 5 job. It's a job that you work when other people recreate, and we really like that mostly. Even now, I'm still working till 7 or 8 some nights, and that's part of the gig. And we're unlike finance. We're unlike IT. We're open Saturdays. We're open Sundays. We're a 7-day a week operation. COVID hit, and we shut down rec centers and some pools for a while, but our parks are open every day. We still had guys checking trails and playgrounds, and it's a place that people use. And so you definitely can't be afraid to work hard. You can't be afraid to work some non-traditional hours, but this is a great industry. And it really is. And if you do care about having fun and serving people, it'd be tough for me to find a better industry to recommend.
Yeah. Well, I think that you hit on some stuff throughout that is, it's the people, right? And so you're working with people and for people. So if you're comfortable helping people move forward in some capacity, right? It's
Right.
making people's lives better in some way. Um, then I think that you're in a good spot with Parks and Rec, whatever that may
Absolutely.
be. So, but I think you're right. I think that something that I try to instill in students as well is the here at my university we have a thing called grit, You got to have grit, and like sometimes it just takes work. You know, so, sometimes there's crappy work, and you just got to get it done. And then sometimes there's work that's awesome, and you still just got to get it done.
Yeah,
So, you know,
absolutely. So I I'll double down on that. We've got ball fields, we got sports fields, and we have this Bermuda grass. And I could probably talk to your guys another hour about how much I love, specialized Bermuda grasses for our ball fields. This ball field has a grass called 1849. Now, right now, it's still a little in shock because of our winter storm, and we have some snow slope and things we're working on. But in general, it is a really responsive grass, and it greens up early. It stays green longer. It doesn't make me overseed with rye throughout most of the year, or throughout most of the off season. And you can rough it up. It's resilient. And I always tell my ops guys, I don't want just my grass to be resilient. I want the guys that program on it and work on it to be resilient. I don't want my grass to go through a tough 4-day sports tournament weekend and be ready to respond Monday morning and my staff to be waving the white flag. I need staff as tough, as gritty, as responsive as our playing surfaces, right? It's got to be both. You can't have a surface die on you and you can't have a staff die on you. You need both. You need good facilities and good staff to manage them. And yeah, that's sometimes a struggle for some people who come in and like, oh, we just get to play all day. You do get to play a lot when you're in this field. You do get to wear shorts sometimes, and you do get to walk outside. You do get to, not be boxed into a cubicle a lot. There's a lot of truth to that, but it doesn't mean that you're not doing hard work, for
yeah.
sure. Yeah.
I tell students a lot that when I was an undergrad for a while, I worked as a custodian and had to get the job done. I needed a job. I needed a paycheck. Uh, I was a nighttime custodian for a little bit, which is funny enough that got me into recreation at Campus Rec, which is a whole other story. But you know,
I was a junior college custodian at the junior college I went to, so I could go there at a very reduced rate. And I had a little closet that was my office, and I cleaned the whole facility. And then I would have to go sit down among some of these students and take a test with them. And it was not, that wasn't always something that no one high fived me. No one said, "Hey,
yeah,
thanks for cleaning that throw up in the hallway." You know what I mean?
right, yeah,
It's more like, weren't you the guy just cleaning up throw up? And you have to sit down and take tests. But um, I enjoyed keeping that facility clean, and I enjoyed the opportunity to have a discounted rate for my college. And I never minded the hard work. I think if you can enjoy serving people and you don't mind hard work, um, Parks and Rec is a viable field.
it's something my grandpa always said is no matter what you're doing, take pride in it, right? So
Yep.
I think that's a good way to end this, man.
Sounds good. Well, I appreciate the time.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Shane. Uh,
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me.
yeah, and if we need to talk again soon.
Yeah, sounds great.
All right, thank you, sir.
All right. Bye bye.